Winter Bells, the almost radio play. Written by Penn Stroke. Produced by Joe Highlord. Starring Emogak, DJ, Christy Clifton, Locker O'Neill, and Greenlitsky. Chapter 1. Home for the Holidays.
Perhaps I should consider wearing crowns more often. They really are smashing, though a tad ostentatious.
Rarity turned from her shop mirror, smiling at the familiar pony who had just come trotting through the door.
Ah, good morning, Applejack. Are you here for your refitting?
Yeah, I'm here, though I still don't see the point. We just wore those costumes last year, and it's not like we could have gone through a growth spurt. We're all too old for that.
Rarity took off her Princess Platinum crown and cape. She folded the cape into a neat bundle, then set the whole ensemble on the table before picking up another costume. This outfit was brown, with large poofs on the shoulders and a big brown hat with a white feather. It was the telltale, half-swarming costume of the character Smart Cookie, secretary to Chancellor Puddinghead.
Now, Applejack, a lot can happen in a year, especially one as stressful as we've had.
Rarity motioned with her hoof towards a small raised platform in the centre of her boutique.
Now, come on. The sooner we can start, the sooner it can all be over.
Well, I reckon there's no arguing with that.
She climbed up onto the small platform and, with Rarity's help, quickly donned her half-swarming costume. Rarity then began to pull, poke and prod, seeing where the costume didn't fit as it should. She levitated a notepad and a pencil in her magic.
Good fit in the chest, but the sleeves are a little tight, and the trail off the back needs a fix. In all, about what I'd expect. I've heard from Rainbow Dash that you've been using your free time this winter to train for the spring rodeo.
Rainbow's been here?
Every pony has. We all have costumes for the pageant, after all, and we all need a refitting. Not a lot to change, thankfully. Twilight Sparkle and Pinkie Pie all fit perfectly into their costumes, and with what Pinkie Pie eats, that is a miracle. Rainbow Dash needed the wings hold adjusted, and Fluttershy needed some of her hems brought in. She's lost weight again. Oh, what wouldn't I do for her metabolism?
And what about you?
We shall not discuss me.
She then put the notebook down and turned back to Applejack.
Besides, I'm already done.
Well, shoot, that was fast.
She began to take off her costume and soon offered the roughly bald pile of clothes to Rarity with a hat resting on top. Rarity scrunched up her nose a little, but took the costume in her magic all the same. She then proceeded to fold all the parts of the costume before setting it back down with the others. Applejack grabbed her old cow pony hat and placed it back on her head. She then began to trot towards the door.
Well, thanks again, Rarity, for taking care of the costume business. I gotta run and try to catch Twi.
Rarity quickly turned in Applejack's direction.
I'm afraid Twilight's already left.
Stopping at the door, Applejack looked back at Rarity.
But I thought she, Spike, and Nix weren't leaving town till tomorrow morning.
No.
Rarity levitated her calendar off of the wall and held it out to where Applejack could see it.
They left this morning. You see, Twilight is taking Nix and Spike to Canterlot today. She wants to have a chance to properly introduce Nix to her parents. Then, tomorrow, Prince Shining Armor and Princess Cadence.
You know, I think you know them two well enough to just call them Shining and Cadence.
We may all be well acquainted with them, Applejack, but that does not mean we shouldn't show them respect. Now, as I was saying, they will be arriving in Canterlot tomorrow. They'll then spend the rest of the day, and the day after, on what I'm told are family traditions, picking out the best logs for hearth-warming fire, going carolling, and the like. Then you, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, and I will arrive in Canterlot on the morning on Hearthwarming Eve. We'll have our dress rehearsal for the pageant that afternoon and the performance that evening. After that, we're all having a big hearthwarming party in the castle with our families and the princesses. Finally, the next afternoon, we're back on the train to Ponyville.
Wow, Rarity, you got all that memorized?
You can thank Twilight for that. She grilled me on the schedule more times than I care to count.
Why? Sounds like a fun time, sure, but not exactly something that has to go by the book. Heck, half the fun of hearthwarming is just being with your family and doing whatever you want. No schedules, no place to be. Just a warm fire and good food.
Oh, please don't talk about food.
Why? Haven't you eaten?
Let's just say I'm trying to get ahead of the hearthwarming weight I tend to gain every year. Besides, to answer your other question, I think Twilight has every reason to be worried about this hearthwarming this year. She is, after all, taking Nynx to Canterlot for the first time since the incident. That, and she's introducing Nynx to the rest of her family. It's a delicate situation. Or, at least, Twilight feels it will be a delicate situation.
Well, shoot. I guess that would make sense. I couldn't blame her parents for being anxious, just as I can't be too mad at Granny Smith. She still don't like seeing Nix around the farm. I love her to death, but Granny can be stubborn as a mule when she has a mind to be.
The apple doesn't really fall far from the tree, then.
What's that?
Nothing! And yes, there is the concern of her parents, but I'm personally more worried about all the other ponies. Last time I was there for the fall fashion season, I heard some rumours. Ponies are starting to find out that the princess did not lock Nynx away in some far-off dungeon, and, from what I've heard, they are not very happy about it.
All through the night, the three ponies kept the fire of friendship alive by telling stories to one another and by singing songs, which of course became the winter carols that we all still sing today. Eventually, the warmth of the fire and singing and laughing reached the leaders, and their bodies began to thaw. It even began to melt their hearts. The three leaders agreed to share the beautiful land and live in harmony ever afterwards, and together they called their new land Equestria.
Very good, Spike.
Twilight said. She smiled and looked up from the script she was holding.
It was perfect. Though, don't you feel the accent is a little thick?
But that's the best part.
He then stood up on the train seat and struck a dramatic pose.
It's the accent that brings the flavor of the olden times to the stage. It's what enchants ponies and draws them in. It's what brings a greater life to the story and a greater meaning to its message of friendship and harmony. Besides, I learned the accent from the pony who did the narrating before me, and he was the best pageant narrator ever. Princess Celestia said so herself.
Well, I like it.
Nick said, looking up from the book she was reading, which was a collection of hearthwarming stories, both old and new. Spike laughed and pointed a claw at Twilight.
Ha! 2 against 1. The accent wins.
Alright.
She packed away the pageant scripts and then, using her magic, began to clear away some of the condensation that built up on the inside of the window. Winter had settled into Equestria, and this was a particularly cold one. Even in the heated train, Twilight, Nix and Spike were bundled up in scarves, trying to keep back the draft coming off the windows. With a bit of heat magic, Twilight cleared part of the window and was able to look outside. She saw the high towers of Canterlot and saw the final tunnel coming up quickly.
Looks like we're almost there.
Then I'm gonna go grab a hot chocolate from the dining car.
But there's a coffee shop at the train station.
Yeah, a coffee shop. That's gonna have a long line, Twilight. I don't know about you, but I'd rather not have to stand around in the snow.
Good point.
She then quickly grabbed a few bits from her saddlebags, which were tucked under their seat, and tossed them to Spike.
Go ahead and grab a hot chocolate for each of us.
Spike nodded and jogged off in the direction of the dining car. Twilight watched them leave and then began to gather their things. She put the small bag of snacks that had been taken out for the train ride back into their saddlebags. She then looked up at Nyx, intending to tell her that she needed to put her book away and get ready to get off the train. But Nyx wasn't reading her book anymore. She was instead at the window, looking out through the hole Twilight had made in the glass, and watching as the train carried them ever closer to Canterlot.
What are you looking at, Nyx?
I'm trying to see the train station. You said your dad was going to be meeting us on the platform.
He is, but I don't think you can see the station from here.
She used her magic to clear another hole in the window's condensation and looked out at Canterlot.
Besides, you don't even know what my dad looks like.
I know, but I still wanted to see if I could see him.
She pressed her cheek against the side of the window, straining her eye to try and see the train station. She then jumped, caught off guard by the sudden blackness as the train dove into the final tunnel before Canterlot Station.
How about we go sit on the other side of the train so we can wave at him as the train pulls in? That sound like a plan?
Nyx nodded, and soon the pair were on the other side of the train. Twilight cleared a single, large hole in the window's condensation, and Nyx pressed her face against the glass. And as Twilight watched Nyx, she couldn't help but smile a little. She was still nervous about coming to Canterlot, but, in the end, she felt the benefits of the trip outweighed the risks. She didn't want Nyx to be a stranger to the rest of her family. She wanted Nyx to know her grandparents, Uncle Shining and Aunt Cadence. She just wanted them all to be able to share a happy half-swarming. Twilight was drawn back out of her thoughts by the bright light from the window. The train had exited the tunnel and returned to the white, wintry world that Equestria had become. The train slowed, beginning its arrival at the station. The towers of Canterlot loomed above them, stretching all the way up to the grey, cloud-choked sky. It looked like the weather patrol was gearing up for another snowstorm. Twilight was now happy she'd brought their heavy jackets. The scarves they currently had on weren't going to cut it.
Hey, I think I can see the station.
She was pressing her face so hard against the glass, she was likely frightening any ponies that happened to be looking at the train as it passed by. Twilight leaned in to take a look out of the window herself.
This train doesn't leave to go back to Ponyville for another hour. Why would they be?
Twilight froze, eyes widening. She quickly pulled Nyx away from the window, flipped the latch and pulled open the window before sticking her head outside. There was a large crowd of ponies on the platform, but they weren't ticketed passengers waiting to get on the train. No, they were ponies with notepads, cameras, fancy hats and press badges. They were reporters. So, are you sure this source is reliable, Column? A beige unicorn nodded and used his tongue to flick the toothpick he was holding from one side of his mouth to the other.
Yep, got it straight from the servant at the castle. Twilight Sparkle is bringing Nightmare Moon in on this train.
But I thought the princesses had drained her of her magic and put her in a jail someplace. The teal photographer Pegasi Quicksnap said.
Well, the official announcement we printed in our paper was, and I quote, Nightmare Moon has been drained of her power and placed in the care of a pony that will ensure she will never again be a threat to Equestria. She is a mare that Princess Celestia trusts completely. Who knows? Maybe we all just heard what we wanted to hear back then. Still, you can't ignore the rumours floating in from Ponyville.
You mean the ones that say Nightmare Moon is still running free?
From what I've heard, she's transfigured herself to look like a filly and has been running around with the other fillies and colts. I even heard some ponies say their friend's brother saw her going to school and that she had somehow magically changed her cutie mark.
Now that has to be a pile of old hay. No teacher in their right mind is going to let Nightmare Moon into their classroom. And no pony can change their cutie mark.
Kid, she's an alicorn. They don't play by the same rules as you and me. After all, if I could cast love magic like that Princess Miyamura Cadenza, I'd be going out with a rich model and wouldn't have to run around Canterlot every day looking for stories.
So are you saying you want to be an alicorn princess?
You bet your flank.
He turned his head and smiled as he and many of the other reporters on the platform saw a light in the distant tunnel.
Now come on, let's get to the edge of the platform before we get muscled out. Be ready to take a picture of her and Twilight. I want them together in the same shot.
Column and Quicksnap joined the growing crowd of reporters who clung together as close to the edge of the platform as they dared. They raised their cameras and pulled out their notepads. Reporters cleared their voices, ready to try and shout above one another to get what could be an exclusive scoop. The train rumbled into the station, its cars clattering as they slowed to a stop. The engine vented its pent-up steam, and the doors to the cars began to open. The few ponies on the train disembarked, and the reporters watched each one of them. There was a pair of older mares who disembarked together, a stallion with his wife and family, who quickly scuttled away from the pack of reporters. One after the other they watched, trying to spot Twilight Sparkle and the filly-sized Nightmare Moon. But then they never saw her. The last passenger got off, the train was emptied, and the cleaning crews began to go through, preparing the passenger cars for the return trip to Ponyville. The reporters glanced at one another, then fanned out, going off the gut instincts they had honed over years of being in the newspaper business. Twilight Sparkle had given them the slip, which really only meant one thing. There was a story waiting to be uncovered. The two older mares who had disembarked the train slowly climbed down the steps of the train station and reached the sidewalk. One was in a half-swarming vest, a bright red hat with a matching vest over top of a deep green blouse. She smiled and whistled down a taxi, but she didn't wait for the other older mare to follow her into the cars. No, she had come to Canterlot alone and departed in the same fashion. This left the other older mare standing on the sidewalk. She was in a heavy shawl with a hood and a large hump on her back that, if one were to look closely, moved and shifted in unnatural ways. Most of her face was wrapped up in a scarf, but for those who could see her eyes, they would notice they were strong and vibrant. They were the eyes of a much younger mare. The second older mare looked around a moment, then smiled and slowly limped her way towards the blue stallion who was standing on the sidewalk, watching the ponies that were leaving from the train station. He was an older unicorn, getting close to being middle-aged, though not quite there yet. He had a darker blue mane and a pair of crescent moons for cutie marks. It was a pony the older mare knew all too well. His name was Nightlight. The disguised Twilight Sparkle continued to play the role of an old mare. As she limped towards her father, she made sure that she was close enough, and then made sure that no pony else was around. Only then did she try and get his attention.
Psst, Dad!
Nightlight quickly turned his head, blinking a few times as he looked over the supposedly older mare that had just crept up beside him.
I'm sorry. Do I know you?
It's me!
With a bit of magic, she pulled down her scarf and revealed her face.
Oh, sorry. I didn't recognize you in that getup. Why are you wearing all that?
Twilight glanced back at the station as she put her scarf back into place.
There are a bunch of reporters standing on the platform like they're waiting for the train, and, well, I could only think one reason there would be so many reporters considering almost no pony else was on the train.
Nightlight nodded, understanding his daughter's concern. He looked back at the train station and saw a few of the reporters come out of the front door. They were looking around, as if searching for something, or some pony. Yet, before they could look their way, Nightlight put a hoof around Twilight's shoulder and cleared his throat.
There you are, Mother!
He called out loudly, enunciating his words forcefully, like he was talking to a mare who was hard of hearing.
You must tell me about your trip while we take the taxi home. Hey, taxi!
Fearing following reporters, Twilight stayed in disguise until the taxi pulled up in front of her house. Thankfully, they didn't live far from the station. The three-story townhouse was, for the most part, just as Twilight remembered it, except for the roof which had been replaced just before she left Ponyville. It was one of the many similar terraced townhouses on the street, which stood in a clean line all the way down the block. It was a well-off neighbourhood, not the fanciest in Canterlot, like the manors and mansions near the palace, but they were close to the heart of the capital city. Celestia's school for gifted unicorns was only a few blocks away, as was the best of the downtown shopping. In all, it was, and always had been, the perfect fit for her family. Nightlight stayed back by the taxi a moment, paying the stallion for the trip, while Twilight stood at the end of the walk that led to their front door. The house was in its holiday best. Garland and strings of enchanted glowing glass hung from the edges of the windows and roof. A wreath hung on the front door, and a blanket of snow covered everything. Twilight doubted she could have found a more welcoming sight in all of Equestria. At least to her.
Twilight.
The hump in Twilight's old mare disguise shifted.
Can we get inside already? It's getting hot under here.
Did her hump just talk? The taxi puller asked with a cocked eyebrow.
Yes, it did. Now, here are your bits, and you can keep the chain.
The prospect of a very generous tip quickly drew the taxi stallion's attention back to Nightlight. Thank you, sir, and have a very happy half-warming. Nightlight nodded and waved a quick goodbye to the taxi stallion before he pulled away. He then turned back and moved up beside Twilight, continuing the illusion that he was helping an elderly mare to the door.
I was wondering if that was where Spike was hiding. How you doing, son?
I'll be doing better once we get inside.
They were soon inside, and, with a flash of magic, Twilight transfigured the shawl she had been wearing back into its original form, her heavy winter coat. A moment later she unzipped the coat's front, peeling it off. She'd been wearing her saddlebags underneath, and both Spike and Nix had been riding on her back. They jumped off within moments, and Spike went to the door, cracking it open a little so he could get some cold air in his face. And the Nix was right behind him, standing a few steps back and smiling as they both recovered from the oven that the inside of Twilight's coat had become.
Here, let me get your coat.
He magically grabbed the coat and hung it on the nearby coat rack before turning and shouting into the house.
Velvet, honey, they're here!
I'll be right down. I'm just putting a few things away.
The voice of Twilight's mother, Twilight Velvet, called down from the top of the stairs. Nightlight chuckled, shaking his head.
Your mother. She can't be happy with guests around unless she knows the house is spotless.
He then turned back to Twilight, his smile widening as she took off her saddlebags.
But you know that as well as I do. Now, come on, give this old stallion a hug.
Twilight was more than happy to oblige. She lifted her forehooves and hugged her father tight, giggling a little as he gave her a squeeze. The pair then stepped apart, letting Nightlight turn and smile at Spike.
And how is my daughter's #1 assistant? I hope you're still keeping her out of trouble.
More than you know.
Well, it's good to see you both. How have things been since the wedding?
Actually, Dad, there's one more pony you need to say hello to. Dad, this is Nix. And Nix, this is your grandfather, Nightlight.
For a moment, Nightlight's smile weakened. He inspected Nix closely as she stepped back anxiously under his gaze. She looked away, staring at her hooves as she scratched her foreleg with the other, but his gaze remained constant. He then took a step forward, towering over her, as most adult ponies did.
Nix?
His tone was calm yet commanding, forcing Nix to look up to meet his gaze. He then bent his head down and extended a forehoof, bringing it to the side of his head.
What's this behind your ear?
He brought his forehoof back a moment later, which was now holding a small holiday cookie. He also smiled, which in turn made Nix smile as she took the cookie. She took a single bite, and her smile grew until it threatened to burst off her face.
This is good,
Was all she could say through the flavourful food that filled her mouth.
That's a secret family recipe that my grandfather came up with. He was a royal chef, you know. And no pony came into this house during the holidays without getting a cookie.
Hey.
Nightlight turned to look at Spike.
There's a whole plate of cookies in the kitchen. In fact, why don't you take Nix in there? You can get yourself cookies and some milk from the fridge for the both of you.
Sounds good.
Spike turned to lead Nix into the kitchen.
Maybe this time I'll actually get to enjoy it.
Nightlight cocked an eyebrow, watching Spike and Nix walk into the living room, and then through the door into the kitchen. He then looked back at Twilight, who smiled and laughed a little under her breath.
He's a little steamed. made him leave the hot chocolate we bought back on the train.
Well, he is a dragon that likes his hot chocolate.
He turned to go to the kitchen, but Twilight caught his shoulder. She was wearing a smile that was both thankful and hopeful.
Yes, honey?
Does this mean...
Nightlight lifted a hoof and placed it on Twilight's shoulder.
Listen, honey, I don't think you should be the one taking care of her. You should be having fun with your friends, finishing your studies with Princess Celestia, and maybe finding a special sun pony like your brother did.
He then smiled.
But that's no reason to ruin Hearth's warming for you, or her. Let's just enjoy the next few days, and we'll talk about it later.
Twilight pulled her father into a hug again, squeezing him.
Thanks, Dad. But I still think I can change your mind before we get back on the train to Ponyville.
A thumping on the stairs drew the pair from their hug, and soon Twilight's hooves were wrapped lovingly around another pony. A white, middle-aged mare with a faded purple and white mane and a cutie mark comprised of 3 stars.
Mom? How are things? You finished your new book?
Trying. Just need to polish off the last couple of chapters. And I need to do it soon. The publishers are starting to get impatient.
Don't worry, I'm sure you'll get it. You always do. And I can't wait to read it.
You'll get the first one off the press. Like always.
Velvet assured her before looking around her home's small entryway.
I thought you were bringing...
They're in the kitchen.
Velvet nodded, turned, and crept to the kitchen door. She poked her head in for just a moment, just long enough to get a glimpse. She then retreated back to where her daughter and husband were standing.
I don't know why, but I thought an alicorn filly would be... bigger. And where's her disguise? I thought we agreed that, when we go out, she'd have her disguise.
We did, and I have it. I just didn't make her wear it on the train.
Twilight opened her saddlebags, revealing the headband contained within.
See? It's all right here. It's got all the enchantments on it, I promise.
Sorry. I didn't mean to doubt you, honey. I just wanted to be sure.
She then moved over beside Twilight, smiling and nudging her daughter's shoulder.
Now, come on. Let's get you a cookie and make sure Spike and Nix don't ruin their dinner.
Well, here it is.
Nix stepped into the room slowly, as Twilight followed a few steps behind. She saw the cool blue decor and the bookshelf that was stuffed to capacity with a wide spectrum of books on magic. She saw the work desk that was neatly organised. She saw the bed, the closet, the old toy chest that had long since been repurposed as a place to put yet more books. It was not all that different from a library, but at the same time, it was still so amazing and wondrous. It was Twilight's childhood bedroom. Nix walked around slowly, looking at all the books on the shelf. She then moved to the window, looking outside. It was dark outside. Big white sticky flakes were floating down from the sky to blanket Canterlot in a fresh layer of white. All of the houses of the street had the little, enchanted lights on, making every home glow with bright, festive colours. It was the kind of view a pony could expect to find on the front of a half-swarming card.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, Canterlot is at its best in winter.
Twilight took a seat beside Nix at the window.
Though I'll admit, most of my time I used this window with my telescope to study stars and didn't really look down at the street. Still, did you have fun today?
Nix nodded her head, recalling the day. They had frosted some more cookies so there'd be a fresh plate for when Shiny and Cadence arrived the next morning. They had then taken a break from the kitchen to play in the backyard. With Twilight, Spike and Nightlight's help, Nix had built a snow pony. They then had a snowball fight. It was Twilight and Nix against Spike and Nightlight. Velvet had been content to just sit and watch from the porch. She loved the holiday season, but wasn't a big fan of snow. After that, they all had a cooked dinner together and played a board game in the living room. So, in the end, it had been a pretty fun day. A really fun day, that was only going to be made better by the idea that she, Twilight and Spike were going to be staying in Twilight's old bedroom.
Good.
She lifted her forehoof, hooked it around Nix, and brought her close.
And you know what? It will only get better tomorrow when Shiny and Cadence get here.
Are you sure?
Of course I am.
It sure didn't sound like it when you were talking to Rarity.
Twilight frowned a little. She'd gone to Rarity so she could get her measurements checked for the pageant costume, and had brought Nix along. She and Rarity had talked about the trip to Canterlot, about her own concerns, about her brother's resentment towards Nyx. The whole time, Nyx was supposed to have been in the other room, playing with Sweetabelle. Apparently that wasn't the case.
Nyx, you shouldn't eavesdrop on other ponies' conversations.
Twilight told her, before sighing and nuzzling the top of her head.
And I know what I told Rarity, but I also know my brother. He's always been protective of me, but he's also a reasonable stallion. Once he has a chance to get to know you, I know he'll come around and he'll be your buff.
Nyx turned to look at Twilight as she cocked an eyebrow.
My what?
Your best uncle friend forever. Why doesn't any pony understand acronyms anymore?
Nyx giggled a little at Twilight's frustration. She then let her head once more rest against Twilight's shoulder. She then yawned as her eyes began to droop. Twilight saw this, and, with a smile and a nudge, she got Nyx back to her hooves. They walked over to Twilight's old bed, a large, queen-sized bed that had more than enough room for the both of them. Twilight carefully tucked Nyx beneath the covers on the right side, kissing her on the forehead gently. She then slowly slipped out of the room, going downstairs to sit and talk with her mother and father, while Spike did as he always did, eat too many cookies and fall asleep on the couch. In the cool grip of night, with snow flicking and dancing in the light from its headlamp, a train chugged down the track with determination only a machine could muster. It ploughed through the snow on the track, clearing a path for the train's cars that rumbled behind it. Many of the windows were dark, as ponies tried to sleep. Others remained lit, the warm light from the train's interior spilling out onto the clean, white snow. Among the windows that were still lit were those that belonged to the last car on the train. This car was very different from the others. Where the others were made to hold dozens of ponies comfortably, the last car was meant to hold just a few. Where other ponies had to try and sleep in their seats, the last car provided a bed. It was a private, royal car, and it was currently occupied by the royal couple, Shining Armour and Princess Miyamore Cadenza. Cadence and Shining were laying on a soft rug in the centre of the royal car, snuggling gently before they retired to their bed. They were watching the fire in the car's stove burn, enjoying the warmth it was pouring out into the air. Shining was levitating a piece of celery, the last from a large bowl of celery sticks and strawberries they had fetched from the dining car. Cadence opened her mouth and gave a small, content purr as the celery was placed onto her tongue. She chopped it down, savouring the crisp flavour before swallowing. She then opened her mouth again and stuck out her tongue, inviting Shining to place another morsel onto it. Shining, however, could only laugh and hold up the empty bowl in his magic.
Shining, would you go get some more from the dining car?
Don't you think you've had enough? This is your third bowl.
Cadence stuck out her bottom lip and looked up at her husband with big, pleading eyes.
But Shining...
He laughed, leaned in, and kissed his wife gingerly on the lips.
Sorry, but your munchies will just have to wait until morning.
She giggled back and returned the kiss. She then leaned into his shoulder, focusing on the fire in the stove.
It will be nice to see your parents again. I haven't talked to them since the wedding.
I know they're looking forward to having you there. I think they're still amazed you want to stay with me in my old bedroom instead of in a guest suite at the castle.
Cadence laughed and playfully stuck out her tongue.
Well, I may be a princess, but I'm also their daughter-in-law, and I want the full daughter-in-law experience. That means I'm going to eat as many cookies as I want, help cook dinner, play board games, and sleep in your old bedroom where I can find some embarrassing old toy, or a stack of comic books you don't want me to see.
Oh, you mean like when I found that old diary of yours last month? The one from when you were still full-sitting Twilight? What was that entry I read? Dear Diary, Shining Armor came back from playing hoofball with his friends while I was babysitting Twilight today. He looked so hot and...
Cadence lit her horn and, a moment later, a pillow flew off their bed and flopped against the back of Shining's head. The pair then shared in a laugh and a kiss before going back to watching the fire in the stove.
I do hope you have a good time, Cadence. Just be careful around the house.
Why would I need to be careful?
Twilight is bringing Nyx.
Cadence sat up and looked into her husband's eyes.
Shining, we've talked about this. I don't think we have any reason to think Nyx is dangerous. Celestia and Luna pardoned her of what she did. Not only that, she's been living with Twilight for the past few months, and there hasn't been any sign of trouble.
I know. Celestia and Twilight have both told me the same thing, but you remember the wedding, don't you? Twilight had a gut feeling that something was wrong. It was because of that gut feeling that the Changeling Queen sent her down into the Gem Caverns, which let her help you escape.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, I just have a gut feeling that I can't trust Nyx. When she was Nightmare Moon, she brainwashed me into leading the Canterlot occupation. What if she had made me hunt you down? What if she had banished you someplace, and it was because I was able to find you? I haven't been able to protect you as I should, and I just want to be careful.
Then be careful. But don't be so cautious that you ruin heartswarming. Twilight really wants you and Nyx to get along.
I know, and I promise I'll try.
Good. Now, come on. Let's go to bed. Twilight and your mother probably have the whole day planned tomorrow, and we'll need our energy.
You go ahead. I'm just gonna be a few more minutes.
Cadence nodded and slowly slipped off to bed, leaving Shining near the stove. He then turned his head. His horn glowed as he opened a flap to a saddlebag that rested near the door of the car. From within, he withdrew a few folders that he levitated over to where he was lying. He set most of the folders down beside him, but kept one suspended in his magic. He flipped it open and began to read down the papers contained inside.
Psychological Evaluation, Form B5, page 2. Last name, first name, middle initial, if applicable. Armor, Shining. Rank, Prince. Examining Doctor, Dr. Brain Trust. Examiner's summary and elaboration of all pertinent observations. Follow-up examination with Prince Shining Armor. This examination is being made at the request of Prince Armor as a follow-up to his debriefing examination after the recent incident involving the second return of Nightmare Moon. After a thorough examination, it is my opinion that blah 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 blah.